Welcome back to Lords here with talkSPORT Cricket, and with me I have freelancers. I have many, I don't know what the collective noun for freelancers is, unemployed.
A loveliness. Oh no, that's ladybirds.
And unemployment of freelancers is maybe the best way of putting it. Cam Ponsonby and Mel Farrell. Mel was actually commentating with us. Cam, you've been around on talkSPORT as well.
Yeah, I've worked for you guys loads. Whenever John's
what I just
willing
said.
to have me.
As a
I'll be
freelancer?
here. Yeah, correct.
I'd actually be really interested in this, Cam. I've never had a job in cricket, right? So
Yep.
I've worked in cricket for 17 years, but I've never had a job. I would assume, have you ever had a job, or has everything been contract as well?
No, you're correct in that. I think I'd call cricket my job for the last 3 years. I started 4 years ago, and then there's a very clear line in the sand where, from basically the England men's test tour to the West Indies in 2022, from that point onwards, this has been my livelihood, as it were. But I'm the exact same as you, is that I've never had a full-time job in this world. I've never been employed, and you kind of just, well, as I'm sure we'll get into, I think last year, I remember, it was 21 people I worked for across the year.
Wow.
And you're kind of...
Can you name them all in alphabetical order?
It's like Ravi Vipara trying to do his kind of franchise teams. I absolutely could not do it, but there's a spreadsheet next door which could.
Mel, you did have a job in cricket. You worked with Cricket Australia briefly. Was that was an actual job? Am I remembering that right?
Yeah, I signed.
Your face is like, was I working for them?
Well, I thought you were about to say Cricinfo, because I was full-time at Cricinfo
Oh, were
for a
you?
while.
So you've had two jobs then?
And then I also had a job with Sporting News Australia during the pandemic.
I don't even know why you're on this panel. You're not even a real freelancer.
Well, I'm someone who's had 3 jobs in cricket and left them all.
But you would, if Cam is freelancing for 21 places a year, you probably wouldn't quite get to those numbers, but you're kind of everywhere doing all sorts of random things.
Yeah, I mean, I'm up there. I also have a spreadsheet, so I do keep that going, and sometimes jobs come in. But I mostly do. I do a lot of stuff for a lot more commentary now for various people, and then writing as well. And I've got a contract at the moment with The Cricketer for 6 months, which is just a part-time one. So that's actually an ideal.
You're about to say, but they're about to get rid of me.
Well, maybe they are. But that's actually kind of really nice, because it's almost an ideal situation where I've got a guaranteed per month amount of money coming in, and then I still have the freedom to be able to freelance. So it's actually really nice having those two things.
So I was a cricket specialist before either of you. I know, Mel, you were in the sports media before I was, but you worked in many different sports at that stage. But it's really interesting to me, having been in the industry for 17 years, how either you two are taking up all the freelance jobs, or there aren't as many freelance jobs. But really what has disappeared, I think, is being a freelance journalist. The ability to be freelance social media, or to be, to be a videographer or commentary and everything, Mel, that's the stuff you didn't even, that wasn't your speciality when you first came across the Cricinfo. You're more of a host, and now you're going in all these different directions. And
that's the key, I think, is you have to have a lot of strings to your bow. You can't just do one thing. I mean, even the full-time writers now often have to do some video in there as well, or things have changed. So whether it's writing, whether it's hosting videos, whether it's doing commentary, you have to, and even Cam does a lot of writing that's not cricket. It's very hard to just solely be able to make it work just doing cricket, and so usually you have to have some other things. You've done a brilliant job in being able to build up your YouTube and podcast empire.
I'll be honest, I only did that because I was sick and tired of freelancing. I was finding it harder and harder, and during COVID there wasn't much work out there. Cam, you, I'm assuming, got into this to be a writer. I mentored you when you were a young 100 writer.
You did indeed, I remember it well.
Yeah, and I'm shocked that you're still in the industry.
No, it's been...
Too much? Too far?
No,
I thought you were a podcaster. I thought you could handle the bands.
I was trying to work out why I was shocked. I was trying, through your mentoring, I was meant to not enjoy it. I don't know.
I didn't think you were very talented, and I thought I tried to ruin you. Those are the two things that happened.
Both of those things are true, which is a shame. No, so I kind of fell into being a freelancer in that I had a quote-unquote normal job after university. I'd always been thinking about doing media, and I was going to have a conversation with my work about potentially going down to part-time hours. Then the world exploded with COVID, and I was put on furlough. And it was a case of, all right, if I don't give this a go now, I never will, basically. So when I was off not working, I started a blog, and then I actually set up a podcast with my cricket club to basically be able to say to university, this is what I've done, this is what I'm doing to try and look into this world of media. Can you let me in, please? And they did. And I remember calling around a lot of people who were sat next door to us in the press box, kind of asking questions like, do I need a degree? Do I need a journalism degree to become a journalist? And I realised everyone said no, but everyone seemed to have one. So I went, okay.
Okay. You look at the wrong person
I
here.
know I'm looking at the wrong person here, but in
do
general...
you have a journalism degree, Mel?
Well, I have a BA in communications, which was partly
sounds like
done through media and journalism.
I would say
if
you go next door, all the journalists who are 30 and younger, or 35 and younger, I reckon for the most part they'll either have an NCTJ or they'll have a broadcast journalism degree, which I did. And out the back of that course, I ended up with kind of 3 small things happening. I had some work from the Wisdom website, I had some work on the 100 Rising programme, which the ECB put together, and David Hops, a former cricket writer for Cricinfo, basically messaged me and wanted to sublet me a day a week. He'd done his time. He didn't want to work 5 days a week anymore. He wanted to do 4.
That's so David Hops. He was like, I don't want to actually do my job. Can you come in and do some of it for me?
And then off the back of that, I was effectively doing 3 small part-time jobs over the course of the summer. That was 2021, and that was just the start of it. And I loved the idea of working in cricket. Cricket is my passion. It's been my favourite sport forever. But I didn't set out necessarily to work in this sport. If I think of all my peers who I graduated with, they all work at Sky or Channel 4 as producers. Some are on screen, some are off screen. But in terms of being a kind of writer first and foremost, that wasn't the intended direction, even if it was.
So what was the intended direction then?
I think, truthfully, this was the best case scenario to work in cricket, but I didn't necessarily think it was...
What job did you want?
Writer. Writing is the skill I admire the most and value the most. If in 30 years' time, the career's over and you say, Cam, what would you like to be remembered as? It would be, he was a good writer, basically. I think.
Well, in 30 years' time, there will be no writing, so we don't need to worry about that.
Oh, he's so negative. He's so negative.
Have you only just met him?
Mel, you were more of a host and a broadcaster at times, but you also did production stuff and all sorts of things. When you got into cricket, it was more maybe at the start of the sort of social media thing of, getting on camera, doing little bits. Obviously, you had that, we won't talk about it now, but your dress split in front of Brett Lee in the middle of the Wacker, all these sorts of things happened. But you it was a little bit different at that time, and there were a lot of opportunities for people who could hold a camera, set up a camera and hold a microphone, which was what a couple of different skills that you had at that point.
Yeah, because I'd had a fair bit of time. I did work in production. I was what in Australia you call a director's assistant, and over here in England it's called a production assistant. So you basically sit next to the director in the truck. You count backwards a lot. You're responsible for all the timings and all that kind of thing. So I had that background, but then back in Australia I'd started freelancing from the start as a journalist. I had enough of a show reel, and I was working in my hometown of Orange, doing news and sport.
Village. Okay.
City, and doing freelance reporting for them, and then I would go down and do shifts at Fox Sports News on the weekend. And so I basically then moved to Sydney full time.
So when you say journalist, are you saying more of a broadcast
journalist? Yeah, so I was definitely more of a broadcast journalist. But because I'd had that production background, it was kind of pretty handy and au fait with the camera and mics and everything else. So there was a bit of that in there as well. And I took some strange jobs at various times. One of the first things I did as a video journalist, I started doing some shifts at the Sydney Morning Herald as a video journalist. And on my first day, I went to do a story, and I had to interview Baz Luhrmann, the Australian director who directed, of course, Elvis, Moulin Rouge, all of these great movies. And it made me so nervous. I literally just picked up this camera that day. I didn't know how it worked. And he's going, oh, let me see you framing. How have you framed me and all of this? And I did the thing that every cameraman tells me they've done this at some time. I buttoned off instead of buttoning on. So the only footage I had of this interview with Baz Luhrmann was the bit before and the bit after. But I mean, you were instrumental to really how the cricket thing started, because I'd taken a full-time job with Cricket Australia, as you mentioned, when they started
How did that go, Mel?
Yeah, I started up cricket.com.au. I signed a 2-year contract, moved to Melbourne, met you and George on that 13-14 Ashes tour, and then I resigned 3 months into a 2-year contract. So, but because I'd met you and George, you kind of knew that Cricinfo were looking for someone to do more video. And I mean, I took a massive risk. You told me that Sambit Bal, the editor of Cricinfo, was going to be at the Oval on day 3 of the 4th test between England and India. So I banked this whole trip. I came over, I did my old job as a production assistant with Sky Sports, and picked up some freelance reporting as well, all so that I could be at the Oval on day 3 of the 4th test, and sat outside with you and George DeBell, and then Sambit basically couldn't ignore my emails anymore. I was standing in front of him, and within 48 hours we shook hands and I had a job at Cricinfo.
Yeah, I am to blame. Cam, so you said you wanted to be a writer. Can you actually take me through? You don't have to go through all the different places you've worked for, because I don't know if we have enough time. But if you could take me through the different jobs you do within cricket as a freelancer. So one would be Adam Collins' PA.
Yep, that's correct. So I'd say, let's use this test series as an example. I have, across the first 2 test matches, been writing 3 pieces of test for the Independent newspaper. So that's kind of a preview, colour piece on request, say, if Jamie Smith scores 180, and then a review of the test match. I've been doing the daily Final Word podcast episodes at the end of the day's play, and I've also been writing for Cricket et al., which is kind of Gideon Hayes' Substack over in Australia, and kind of doing a wrap for them. But the best case scenario, what you're really trying to do is you're trying to double and triple up, which you guys all know very well. So the kind of freelance life has worked for me was a tour last year, the West Indies men's white ball tour, and I was working for talkSPORT, so I'd get to the game really early, do the pre-match interview for talkSPORT. The match would happen, I'd write a match report for The Guardian on the whistle, hit send on that as the last ball was bowled, run downstairs, do the post-match interviews for talkSPORT, run back upstairs, put the quotes from the press conference into The Guardian match report, go home, and then, because everyone's asleep in the UK already, write for Cricinfo and do an analysis piece. And that's kind of the dream scenario where you've got...
I mean, it sounds like a nightmare.
It was perfect. It was such a good 3 weeks. I loved it. And that's what you're trying to do, where you're effectively doing 2 or 3 jobs in one, and that's where you make your money. Because as you guys know, it's kind of a very it can be a feast or famine lifestyle when people need you. And in effect, in my own experience, this is the first time I've ever really worked in English summer, because no one needs help getting to Lords.
No, I mean, I think, doing that smaller series, I think most people are like, I need to go on an Ashes, or
absolutely not.
And it's like, you actually need to go on the limited overs series where none of the major journalists want to go to, or the broadcasters don't send a full team.
Well, probably the best one was doing the Women's T20 World Cup in South Africa. The women's tournaments are often really good, because what happens is a lot of outlets know that they should be covering Women's World Cups, and they want to look like they're doing it, but they don't have any budget for it. So you become a cheap way for them to have coverage.
You end up picking up 3 or 4 gigs instead of 1, don't you?
Yeah, and I'm actually, so how the sausage is made, that's what I'm doing at the moment, because I'm considering going and parking myself in Colombo for a month at the upcoming Women's World Cup. And so I've started putting out feelers now to just see, and it is ideally you want that, and it's having the different kinds of work too, because when you're talking about what Cam's talking about in having 3 or 4 people that you're working for, a key, I think I couldn't write for 3. It's takes too much for me. I'm not good enough for that.
I've seen you. Such a slow writer.
I know. But if you've got one that's like a broadcast or a radio or a video
or a
gig,
social gig
or whatever, that helps, because those things they're immediate, and when you do them and send them, they're done. Whereas once you start writing, I've written for 3 in the past. That's my absolute maximum. It's really hard.
It also gets a bit silly with, and Mel's completely correct there, if you're doing different styles of media, they also complement each other. You might interview someone for one outlet and they say something that's really interesting that then helps and informs something for you for another outlet that you're writing for later. And if you're doing, without putting too fine a point on it, if you're writing the same piece 3 times over, A, it's bad, and B, I remember I had to do it once where I was doing...
You're assuming Mel's are bad.
No, as in if it's a news piece, the news is the same. The people said the same stuff. And so I had to write...
different intros.
I had to write 3 600-word pieces of the same news quotes that had been spoken. And like the thesaurus got a hell of a run out that day. So I was like, it's the same thing. So ideally you want to avoid that situation. But it's fun. It's fun, Jarrod. I like it.
I did one when I was working for 3 different organisations on the Women's Ashes over here. I was working for the ABC in Australia. I was writing for them. And then the Guardian had asked me to write on this same match as well, and I'd said yes. And then the Independent called up. And so I checked with the Guardian. They said, look, we don't mind as long as you prioritise our piece and file that first. And also, can you use a nom de plume for the Independent? So there is still to this day a match report on that Women's Ashes match by Charlie McLennan. And that's me. I had to make it up on the spot.
And it's worth knowing that is a very common thing in sports writing.
Is it anymore?
It doesn't happen as much now because generally you are hired now because of your social media background and your name. But it was only 4 or 5 years ago that I used to go through cricket publications trying to work out which were the real names and which were the fake names. It wasn't that long ago, Cam. Me and Mel have been around for a little bit longer. So Mel, what about the commentary? How does that start? I know how it sort of happened for me. For me, it was more. I'd done Test match SOFA, and then I started working with Jim Maxwell on a couple of projects, and he was just like, "You should start commentating." But how did you get into the sort of commentary stuff?
Do you know, the first one was a series in Australia between Australia women and New Zealand women, and I think that it was the first time Cricket Australia had done some streaming. They streamed games, first series ever of any kind. And I think they had already approached every woman, and there aren't very many in Australia, certainly then. There's
a lot of women in Australia, not a lot of women in cricket.
Who'd commentated. And I don't think, and not even in cricket. I think they are some commentators who, like Steph Brantz and others who'd commentated on other sports, and no one was available. So there's me showing up going, I've got no idea what I'm doing. So, and the only people I had commentating with me, there was no other commentator. They basically just rotated whatever players weren't playing in that match. So that was my first time doing it. And what I would find is actually was more coming over here and getting an opportunity on the BBC, primarily at first when Australia women were touring, and then kind of just branched out. A lot of the time it's absolutely being in the right place at the right time and taking those risks that I spoke about in putting yourself out there. And I pushed against, though. I now mostly commentate on men's cricket. I do both, and I'm very happy to do both, but I've tried to push a bit against, because most of my time is covering men's cricket, but then I would ask to commentate on women's cricket or talk about it. And so I've tried to make sure that I don't want to be nicheified.
Can I give you a great story about someone who may or may not be in this room, John Norman? When he was a freelancer, he was offered a gig to commentate basketball. But John Norman doesn't know anything about basketball. I didn't really understand it. And all he'd ever really done is play the game NBA Jam. And so he just kept saying, he's on fire, and all the NBA Jam phrases over and over again, until eventually I think they said to him, it's quite clear you don't know anything about this sport. Maybe we should get someone else. And I remember my favorite freelancing, someone was asking me about this the other day, my first freelancing job. So most of my stuff early on was on my blog. And, I was getting sponsored on my blog, so I didn't really need to find freelancing. And then I was heading to the MCG for the 10-11 Ashes, and I got a call from someone going, are you free to be a stringer on Boxing Day? And I went, yes, absolutely. hung up the phone, Googled stringer, because I didn't know what the phrase meant. It just meant freelancer for an agency. And then I wrote agency copy, and I was so nervous about it, I wrote the most bland agency copy of all time. It happened to be a really exciting day, so I actually rewrote it to be more exciting. But it does tell you how many times you have to say yes to something that you've never done before. You must have that, Cam.
Well, the phrase I always use, which is a bit twee, is the best ability is availability. Just be there. Just be around for someone. Someone's going to fall over, and someone's going to need help at the last minute. I always think as a freelancer, you're basically everyone's 12th man. You're waiting for someone to be ill, someone to not be able to make it to a tour, something to have gone wrong, and then you're just helping at a time in need. And it's the thing I found interesting and sometimes a challenge in reference to you kind of like writing a bland piece of copy and then it getting scaled up, is trying to match the tone of who you're writing for. Because often I remember writing for one outlet, and one of our colleagues had got me the job, and I'd written, the first 2 things I'd written for them, I'd include like a joke or 2, and then when it'd gone up online or on newspaper, like they'd just been taken out. And so I wrote a few more things. I went, okay, they don't want the jokes, I'll leave the jokes out. And our colleague was kind of like, mate, play your shots. Like, I've recommended you for a reason. Like, be good, be yourself. I was like, yeah, but I'm very aware that I'm filing at 11:30 p.m. UK time. This is the last thing that this kind of sub-editor on the desk is getting. This person just wants to go home. And in that instance, the best feedback I could get to that outlet's desk is clean copy, fine. It was on time, it was to length. I could just hit upload and I could go to bed, basically. And trying to work out when you have the opportunities to play your shots, be funny, try and make the joke or 2, or where it's just your job to be, just tick a box for us. We don't care who you are, we just need this done.
I would tell you a story. There was a really talented writer who came over to the UK not long after I did, and he basically did everything wrong as a freelancer. So he had this idea in his head that like cricket writing was a bit like, you know, magazine writing in America, that he was going to have these relationships with editors for life, and he was going to have 20 emails back and forth and big phone calls, and they were just like, we're just trying to get copy in the magazine, like we're oversubscribed, we need to cut, and he didn't understand it, and he ended up alienating everyone in the industry. So part of it, Mel, is just being, you know, I always say Pommy and Bangwa is a perfect person to hire for any broadcast, because everyone loves Pommy. He's the nicest person you'll meet in almost anywhere. He's always on time. He's always professional. He does everything right. That's a big part of just keeping yourself in this career.
Yeah, and I think, you know, it's also about being adaptable and flexible as well, because just to what Cam was saying, you know, there's very different kinds of writing as well out there. There's a massive difference between writing a color piece or an analysis piece as opposed to, you know, on the buzzer kind of report. So those things, and I also find, I know that I've got jobs before where I probably got them because someone's thought that I would fit in well with the team, or they thought I'd be easy to work with.
They were wrong,
but you know, as long as I can keep fudging it and fooling people, that is a massive part of it. Because sometimes too, you know, it can be a really stressful business, and so you know, there are times when people don't want to have the hassle with working with a prima donna, and I've not done anything enough to be a prima donna about.
Whereas Cam has.
Well, that's true.
I was actually going to ask you two if you've experienced the same. Something I've found as an advantage of being freelance is, because you belong to no one, I found at least everyone looks after you a bit. I kind of started, I was 26, 27. I wasn't working for the Telegraph, so I wasn't the Telegraph's responsibility to look after. Everyone was like, oh, there's this new kid who's just here. He's not encroaching on any of our actual spaces. He's not a competitor. And I felt at least that people kind of very open to putting me under their arm, being like, come along, mate, we'll try and give you opportunities where you can. I don't know if that's a kind of new age press box mentality. I know that 20 years ago it was a bit different, or whether even 10 years ago, 15 years ago, when you were the original fan of the laptop, encountered a bit more hesitancy.
It was very different when I came in. When I came in, I think because it wasn't like I came in going, I'm going to disrupt cricket writing, but I did it in such a way that I did kind of anyway. So I thought I was telling the stories the way my friends told the stories.
Yeah.
You know, the way that we talked, and I thought I would build a career because no one had done that. I didn't realize that there would be as much hesitancy. I didn't realize that there were things that you couldn't do. So there are still relationships that I struggle with today, Cam, because I was very honest in my early writings. I still think I was right to write those things, but I'll put it this way, I've never appeared on Sky, and I don't think that's a mistake. I don't think Sky are unaware that I'm available. I don't one of the few people never to do the Surrey commentary streams. Again, I don't think that's a mistake. I think these things are on purpose.
What is this? Is this like a vendetta against the world?
No,
These
but
people aren't hiring me, those people aren't hiring me.
I think because of early on, there was a lot of stuff that I did, and I did a lot of things right, but I did a lot of things in a different way. Whereas I think if you come in the way that you did, Cam, which is, okay, I understand the industry a little bit here. I'm going to write a piece for The Guardian like The Guardian. I'm going to write a piece for The Independent like The Independent and try and fit in. That I did the complete opposite. I lit myself on fire and ran through the press box naked. And it was a bit, I'll tell you, my first job with the Cricketer, they got me into the press box and they sent me a list of how to dress. And I was like, really? I didn't know there was like rules on how you had to dress in press boxes. And then they said, no, we're just afraid that you won't dress correctly. So I don't think you had that problem. I mean, you grew up with cricketers. Was Alex Tudor your school coach?
No, Tudor was just from the same club as me.
Same club, was it?
So yeah, you grew up, mate. It was amazing. Like you're 10, 11 years old, and Tudor had just finished his career with Surrey, and he was down coaching, and he's also a QPR fan, and I'm a QPR fan, and my best friend was a QPR fan. So you're going down to play cricket in the summer holidays. There's this guy who played for England there, and he supports the same football team as you. So he takes an interest in you guys. So
I can tell you, he's very. I remember you came up at one stage. I think you might have been working on talkSPORT, and he was so excited that you had got into the industry.
So I remember my first time pretty much ever at Lords. It must have been 2 or 3 years ago. I'm really glad you said this because it reminded me. And I was sat right in the middle of the press box. And for those who haven't been there, like it's a fiddle to get into the middle. There's cramped room. It's difficult. And I'm sat there. I'm nervous and I'm excited. I'm here at Lords. This is brilliant. And Tudor's here for whatever reason with some kind of hospitality party. And he's 25 metres away at the back of the box, and he sees me and he like shouts out to me, and he wades his way through these chairs, all kind of 6'4" of him, and gives me like the biggest hug.
Lots of limbs.
And it was like you're there, and like you're the new kid on the block, and then in front of everyone, this former England player is giving you a big hug. Like it makes you feel amazing.
So that didn't happen with me. The opposite happened with me. I mean, Mel, yours was very different. I mean, one of the issues I had is I was pioneering a lot of stuff, and so there was a lot of the media going, well, he's making comedy videos about cricket, but that's not proper cricket writing, and he's writing with swear words. You don't do these sorts of things. You came in again with that outsider mentality because you were a broadcast journalist, and what was mostly a written broadcast, a written press environment at that stage.
And it felt like it took quite a while for me to earn respect. I think it's very different now.
Let me know when you have.
Yeah, thanks. But certainly when you were coming in from that, and I do think it is different now for like people like Cam coming in because the industry's changed. But yeah, I was female, and B, I came from a broadcast background, and there's a little less snobbery now than there was, but there used to be quite a lot of snobbery when it came to the written press and the broadcast or the video or the social media kind of thing.
Well, I can tell you, I was told flat out by a very respected member of the English written press that I wasn't a real journalist because I did videos. That's how it was, and you came in not long after that was happening.
Yeah, so I remember a colleague once saying to me, we were talking about the difficulty of working out what the story of the day was, and when I sort of said something, they said, yeah, but you're not a writer. And I was writing at the time, but I felt like I had to, it was a lot harder, I think, to do that.
I'm sorry for saying that.
Yeah, good on you. It was not you. But yeah, it did take, I think, longer, but also being female, because I was always also the only female, so that there was still
there's a disadvantage and an advantage to that, isn't there? I felt when I came over from Australia that I got a lot of jobs because I was Australian and they were looking for a different voice, and then the other side happens, right, when there are disadvantages that come from that, and when you're on your own as well. Yeah,
because quite often it's what kind of voice you have. And by that I mean whether you're from a certain country or whatever, that always plays a big part in it. So it just generally it took a while to fit in. There were times when maybe it has advantaged me where where someone's looking for a female broadcaster or a female perspective. I don't think that happens as much for me now, at least I hope not. I hope that I get those gigs because I've been around, but it just took a long time. There were a lot of remarks made at those first few years where I just did not feel like I was taken seriously as a real journalist or whatever, and it probably took a couple of years of working for Cricinfo and writing for Cricinfo that I felt like people started to take me more seriously.
And I think that's a big point, though, isn't it? Because I think what Cam has come through is a completely different environment where everyone does so many different things that it's funny now. I used to look in press box and be able to tell you basically what everyone did or what they were doing in that test match. And now I don't even know what you're doing here, Cam. Like, you're next to me. I know you're probably doing final word, and but I don't know. Whereas before it was a lot more clear and defined what everyone did. So where do you see it going? You're the young one here. We're basically both dead, me and Mel.
I think the next 12 months is really interesting in that a lot of outlets, because this year is India, then the Ashes, are going, all right, let's give cricket a go now and let's see what happens. So you've got the Observer, who's just been purchased by Tortoise Media. You've got the Athletic giving cricket a go.
Kind of.
You've got talkSPORT, who have got the digital rights for this series in a way where there's now 2 domestic broadcasts in a way there's never been before. People are seeing whether cricket can provide the success and the numbers they want. So the best case scenario is, on the one hand, it's the best time to be a freelancer at the moment because there's going to be opportunities. There's more opportunities, more money being spent than there has been over the last year or two. On the flip side, it could not work in a year's time. You go, blimey, like, what is next? I know for me, the challenge I find personally is that, don't get me wrong, at the moment I love it. I go away each winter and I kind of follow England, and that's realistically where I make the majority of my money because, again, you're much more used to an outlet if you're overseas than if you're at home. I would eventually like to not have to do that all the time, to translate that into regular work at home in the country, and so for that to happen, you'll need more regular cricket work or to become a better broadcaster, become a better writer, and get employed more. But for the most part, it's been fun.
But the thing is, at least in England, there's still an industry. The freelance market in Australia is virtually non-existent.
I would say the freelance market in cricket is really never been at a lower rate than when I've worked in it.
Yeah, but still, I tell you, from experience, it is much better in England than it is in Australia. Yeah, Australia is, which is why actually I didn't even cover the Border Gavaskar Trophy last summer because I got work in South Africa on the SA20. And it just wasn't worth it for me covering that series in Australia. You
started as a production assistant. You then became in front of camera, broadcast journalist, writer, and then commentator. What random thing are you going to try and get your hand at next, Mel?
Well, that's a really good question.
Because there's no way you can really guess where the industry's exactly going to go.
Yeah.
But there will be opportunities for you in the future, won't there?
Yeah. I actually have no idea what will happen next. But the thing is, I've always been willing to take a risk and do something utterly stupid, which most people would think, oh, you're going to go to England for a month to try and meet someone on a specific day at a match. But yeah, I just take whatever risk comes along and see where it ends up. Because unlike Cam, I am really bad at staying at home and doing stuff. If I stay at home, if I'm not somewhere random doing some commentary or reporting on something, I get really anxious and feel like I need to take off again. So I'm very fortunate because I'm a dual citizen, which means that I've been able to come over here and work the English summer and then go wherever. Thank you very much for both of you coming on. Just so you're aware, John told me beforehand, neither of you are getting paid for this, just in case. Yeah, I checked. That's generally the first question that any freelancer has. The players are coming back out into the middle. Neil Manthorp is behind me at the moment. We'll have a quick break here, and then afterwards we'll be back with the cricket.